Welcome to HOA Boardroom Battles. The board picked the wrong week to play games. I stepped into the driveway, and Karen screamed that driveways were not for parking during enforcement hours. "I am recording this, and it is going straight to management," she shouted, waving her phone at me like a weapon. A bright yellow vehicle immobilizer tire clamp sat on the ground between us, the metal jaws open and ready. I looked at my car, then at her, then at the tow truck idling at the curb by the community entrance sign. My name is not important. What matters is that I live in Savannah, Georgia, in a gated neighborhood called the Preserve at Oak Grove, and the Parking Compliance Association had just declared war on me over a space I owned. I work as a commercial photographer, so I always have a camera and extra batteries, and I had been documenting everything since the notices started 2 weeks ago. The stakes were brutal. I was trying to refinance my condo, and any lien threat on the title could wreck the deal before closing. Catherine Morgan stood 3 feet away, her brown pixie cut whipping in the wind, her white cardigan flapping around her purple undershirt. She wore a white sun hat that kept trying to fly off. She dragged a portable folding sign stand into the driveway and planted it next to my front tire. The sign had no readable text, but I knew what it said: "Violator tow on site." She smiled. "I decide what counts as compliant, not you," she said, her voice clipped and sharp. "Your camera does not matter. My minutes are the truth." She tapped her phone screen and showed me a photo timestamp that claimed I had parked in a fire lane at 11 last night. I had not. I had been home in my assigned spot since 6. Catherine was the HOA president, and she had turned parking enforcement into a personal crusade. The Preserve at Oak Grove was the kind of neighborhood where one missing guest pass could turn into a scandal that got discussed for weeks. Every driveway had lines, every curb had paint. Every visitor needed a permit. Catherine had installed a system of surprise parking patrol photos at night, with timestamps that never matched reality, and she used them to justify fines, tows, and immobilization fees. I did not argue, because I already had something in my pocket she did not know about. A management company internal note, leaked to me by a neighbor who worked in the office, admitting the violation Catherine had cited was fabricated to justify a tow quota. The note was dated 3 days ago. It named Catherine and the tow vendor. I planned to use it to request a temporary order to stop enforcement while the dispute was reviewed, but I needed the right moment. Catherine stepped closer. The wind rattled the tow chain hanging off the truck. She said the fine schedule was changing at the first of the month, and the deadline to pay before the lien hit my title was tomorrow. One day, I felt my stomach drop. A man in a reflective vest climbed out of the tow truck. He walked over, dragging a wheel lift remote on a cord. Catherine pointed at my car. He looked at me, then at her, then back at me. He asked if I was refusing to move. I said I was parked in my own driveway, in my assigned space, and I had proof the violation was fake. He shrugged and said he had blanket authorization from the HOA, and I would have to prove the contract was expired if I wanted him to leave. Catherine smiled wider. She said she had minutes from a hearing I supposedly missed, and the hearing notice had been posted in the community portal 2 weeks ago. I checked the portal every day. There had been no notice. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my screenshots. Nothing. She laughed and said the portal purged notices after 48 hours, and it was my responsibility to check constantly. The tow driver bent down and picked up the yellow tire clamp. He carried it toward my front passenger tire. I stepped between him and the car. Catherine shouted that I was interfering with enforcement, and she was calling the police. I told her to go ahead. I was recording everything, and I had already sent copies to my attorney. She hesitated. The wind gusted hard, and her sun hat flew off. She chased it across the driveway, cursing. The tow driver paused, clamp in hand, and looked at me. He asked if I really had an attorney. I said yes, and I also had proof the tow contract between the HOA and his company had expired 6 months ago, which meant he was operating on a public street without valid authorization. His face changed. He pulled out his phone and called his boss. He put it on speaker. The boss asked what the problem was. The driver explained. The boss asked Catherine if the contract was current. She said of course it was. The driver said the HOA had not renewed since March, and the city had sent a letter last month calling the tow program unauthorized. Catherine went pale. The boss on the phone told the driver to pack it up and leave. The driver dropped the clamp on the ground with a clang and walked back to the truck. Catherine screamed at him to stop. He ignored her. The truck pulled away from the curb, amber lights still flashing. Catherine turned to me, her face twisted with fury. She said this was not over, and she would make sure I paid every cent of the fines plus late fees, legal fees, and collection costs. I said nothing. I picked up the yellow tire clamp from the driveway and carried it to the curb. I set it down next to the community entrance sign and took a photo. Catherine grabbed the folding sign stand and dragged it toward me like she was going to throw it. She stopped, breathing hard, and said, "I decide what counts as compliant, not you." Then she turned and walked toward the clubhouse. I went inside and called my attorney. I explained the situation, fabricated violations, expired contracts, blanket tow authorizations on public streets, and a management company note admitting the fraud. My attorney said it was enough to file a complaint and request a temporary restraining order on enforcement while the dispute went to the board. He also said the city would be very interested in the unauthorized tow program, especially if it involved kickbacks or favoritism tied to a preferred vendor. The next morning, I got a notice in my mailbox. It was an attorney letter from Catherine, full of bluff language about missed hearings, escalating fines, and a pending lien. The letter claimed I owed $2,000 in towing fees, immobilization fees, hearing fees, and administrative costs. The letterhead was fake. I looked it up online. The law firm did not exist. I called my attorney again. He laughed and said the fake law firm was a common HOA intimidation tactic, and Catherine had just handed me another piece of evidence. He told me to save everything and prepare for the hearing. The board meeting was scheduled for Friday night, 3 days away. I started building my case. I reached out to the neighbor who had given me the management company note. Her name was Diane, and she lived 2 buildings over. She had been hit with the same tow and immobilization scam 3 months ago, and she had been too scared to fight it. She paid the fees, and Catherine moved on to the next target. Diane said she had screenshots of Catherine's posts in the neighborhood group chat, admitting she was using the tow program to clear out cars she did not like. Diane offered to testify. I also contacted the tow company directly. The driver I had met in the driveway was named Luis, and he agreed to meet me at a coffee shop off-site. He brought a stack of invoices showing favoritism tied to the HOA preferred vendor deal. The invoices listed the same cars being towed repeatedly, always for minor violations, always with inflated fees. Luis said Catherine had been pressuring him to hit quotas, and his boss had finally told him to stop because the city was asking questions. I spent the next 2 days organizing everything into a tabbed binder. I had the management company note, the city letter about the expired contract, the fake attorney letter, the invoice trail from Luis, and Diane's screenshots. I also had my own photos and videos from the driveway confrontation, including Catherine's face when the tow driver refused to clamp my tire. Thursday night, I got a call from Diane. She was panicking. Catherine had posted in the group chat that anyone who testified against the HOA at the meeting would be subject to a special audit of their guest parking logs, permit compliance, and trash placement. Diane was terrified. I told her we had enough evidence without her testimony, but if she wanted to help, just showing up in the audience would be enough. She agreed. Friday morning, the day of the meeting, I got another notice. This one claimed I had missed a mandatory pre-hearing mediation session that had been scheduled for Wednesday. I had never been told about a mediation session. The notice said failure to attend meant I had forfeited my right to dispute the fines, and the lien would be filed automatically. I forwarded it to my attorney. He said it was another fabrication, and we would address it at the meeting. I arrived at the clubhouse early. The meeting was scheduled for 7. I walked in at 6:30 with my binder under one arm and my camera bag over my shoulder. The room was set up like a courtroom, a long table at the front for the board, rows of folding chairs for residents, and a podium in the center. Catherine sat at the head of the table, shuffling papers. She saw me and smiled. "I decide what counts as compliant, not you," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Your camera does not matter. My minutes are the truth." A few residents in the audience turned to look. I walked to the front row and sat down. I set the binder on my lap and waited. The meeting started at 7. Catherine called the session to order and read through the agenda. Parking enforcement violations, hearing appeals, fines and liens. My name was fourth on the list. I waded through 3 other cases. Each one was the same. A resident stood up, explained their situation, and Catherine dismissed them with a wave. The board voted unanimously to uphold the fines. The residents sat back down, defeated. My turn. Catherine called my name. I stood up and walked to the podium. I opened the binder and pulled out the management company note. I said I was disputing the parking violation on the grounds that it was fabricated, the tow contract was expired, and the enforcement program was operating without city authorization. Catherine interrupted me. She said I had missed the hearing, forfeited my appeal, and the lien was already filed. I pulled out the second document, the notice claiming I had missed the hearing. I said the notice was never posted in the portal, and I had screenshots proving it. Catherine said the portal purged notices after 48 hours, and it was my responsibility to check. I pulled out the third document, the portal terms of service, which stated notices had to remain visible for 14 days. Catherine went quiet. If you are enjoying this story, please like and subscribe for more wild HOA drama where the rules backfire on the people who invented them. I pulled out the fourth document, the city letter. I read it aloud. The letter stated that the tow program operated by the Preserve at Oak Grove Parking Compliance Association was unauthorized as of March, and any further enforcement on public streets would result in fines and legal action against the HOA and the vendor. Catherine stood up. She said the letter was a misunderstanding, and the contract had been renewed. I pulled out the fifth document, the invoice trail from Luis, showing no renewal payment and no current contract on file. The audience started murmuring. One of the board members, an older man named Gerald, asked Catherine if she had renewed the contract. She said yes. Gerald asked for proof. Catherine shuffled through her papers. She could not find it. Gerald asked me if I had any other evidence. I said yes. I pulled out the management company note. I explained that it was an internal memo admitting the violation Catherine had cited was fabricated to justify a tow quota. The memo named Catherine and the vendor. It was dated 3 days before the driveway confrontation. The room went silent. Catherine lunged forward. She tried to grab the binder. I stepped back. She screamed that I was lying, that the documents were fake, that I had no right to disrupt the meeting. Gerald stood up and told her to sit down. She refused. Gerald called for a vote to suspend the enforcement program pending an independent audit. The board voted 4-1. Catherine was the only no. Gerald asked if there were any other violations tied to the same enforcement program. Diane stood up from the back row. She said she had been hit with the same scam 3 months ago, and she had screenshots proving Catherine had admitted in the group chat that she was targeting cars she did not like. Diane walked to the front and handed Gerald her phone. He scrolled through the screenshots. His face went dark. Gerald called for a second vote to remove Catherine from the board immediately and refer the matter to the management company for investigation. The vote was 4-1 again. Catherine voted no. The rest voted yes. Catherine stood there, frozen, her face white. Then she grabbed her papers, her portable folding sign stand, and her purse, and she stormed out of the room. The door slammed behind her. The audience erupted in applause. Gerald turned to me. He said the HOA would refund the tow and immobilization fees automatically to everyone hit in the enforcement wave, and they would clear the ledger of any fines or liens tied to fabricated violations. He also said the board would be holding a special election to fill Catherine's seat, and anyone interested in running should submit their name by next Friday. I nodded and sat down. After the meeting, Diane came up to me. She thanked me for fighting. She said she had been too scared to do it herself, but watching me stand up made her realize she was not alone. Luis, the tow driver, was waiting outside in the parking lot. He said his boss had fired him for refusing to clamp my tire, but he had already found a new job with a legitimate towing company that did not do HOA work. He thanked me for the invoice evidence, and he said he was filing a complaint with the state about the kickback scheme. I went home and emailed my attorney. I told him the board had voted to remove Catherine, suspend enforcement, and refund all fees. He said it was the best possible outcome, and he would file a motion to close the dispute formally and clear the lien threat from my title. The refinance could proceed. I felt the weight lift. The next week, the management company launched an audit. They found that Catherine had been running the tow program as a side business, pocketing a percentage of every fine and tow fee through a shell company she controlled. The vendor had been paying her directly, and the HOA had never seen the money. The total was over $80,000. The management company referred the case to the police. Catherine was charged with embezzlement and fraud. The special election happened 3 weeks later. I did not run, but Diane did. She won by a landslide. Her first act as a board member was to disband the Parking Compliance Association and replace it with a simple guest pass system that residents could manage online. No more surprise patrols. No more fabricated violations. No more predatory tow vendors. I saw Catherine one more time, about a month after the meeting. I was walking to my car and she was standing by the curb near the community entrance sign, the same spot where the tow truck had staged. She was holding a box of her belongings from the clubhouse office. She saw me and stopped. For a second, I thought she might say something. Then she turned and walked away. The bright yellow tire clamp was still sitting by the curb where I'd left it. Nobody had picked it up. It sat there for weeks, rusting in the rain, until the management company finally sent someone to haul it away. Every time I walked past it, I thought about the moment Catherine had tried to use it on me, and how her own rules had brought her down. The refinance closed on time. I got the keys to a lower rate and a clean title. The lien threat disappeared. My attorney sent a final letter to the HOA confirming the resolution and warning them against any retaliation. The board responded with an apology and a promise to reform the enforcement policies. Diane made sure they followed through. Catherine's trial was set for the following spring. I was called as a witness. I brought the binder, the screenshots, the invoices, and the video from the driveway confrontation. The prosecutor used everything. Catherine pleaded guilty to avoid a longer sentence. She was ordered to pay back the $80,000, plus fines and legal fees. She lost her house. She moved out of the neighborhood. The preserve at Oak Grove changed after that. The new board under Diane's leadership was transparent, fair, and focused on actual community needs instead of enforcement quotas. The parking rules were simplified. The guest pass system worked. People stopped being afraid to park in their own driveways. I kept my camera ready, just in case. I kept the binder in my car, updated with new documents every time something felt off. I kept the screenshots, the invoices, the notes. I learned that the only way to beat an HOA that had gone rogue was to meet them with their own rules, their own paperwork, and their own words turned back on them. One afternoon, about 6 months after the trial, I was backing into my driveway when I saw a new neighbor moving into the building next to mine. She was struggling with a heavy box. I walked over and helped her carry it inside. She thanked me and asked if the neighborhood was as strict as the online reviews made it sound. I laughed and said it used to be, but things had changed. She asked what happened. I told her the short version. The HOA president had tried to run a tow scam, got caught, and lost everything. The new board was fair and reasonable. She looked relieved. Then she asked if I had any advice for dealing with HOA drama. I said yes. Document everything. Never assume the rules are being followed. And if someone tells you their minutes are the truth, check the timestamps yourself. She laughed and said she would remember that. I gave her my number and told her to call if she ever needed help. Then I went back to my driveway, parked my car, and locked the door. The yellow tire clamp was gone. The tow truck had never come back. Catherine was gone. The nightmare was over. I still live in the preserve at Oak Grove. I still see Diane at board meetings. I still carry my camera and my binder. But now, when I pull into my driveway, I do not check over my shoulder for a tow truck. I do not scan the curb for a yellow tire clamp. I do not brace for a screaming match with someone who thinks their minutes are the truth. Catherine tried to use the rules as a weapon. She tried to intimidate, fabricate, and profit from fear. She thought her title and her vendor deal made her untouchable. But she made one mistake. She picked a target who documented everything, who refused to back down, and who had the proof she did not know existed. In the end, her own words came back to bite her. "Your camera does not matter, my minutes are the truth," she had said. But my camera did matter. My minutes were the truth. And when I used them, she had no defense. The board election challenge flipped the power dynamic. Catherine stormed out when the vote went against her, and everyone saw it. The HOA refunded the tow and immobilization fees and cleared the ledger. The nightmare ended not with a dramatic showdown in court, but with a quiet vote in a clubhouse meeting room, and a woman walking out the door with a box of her things, knowing she had lost. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.